So good morning. Welcome back to day 2 of the conference. Could be day 7 or 8 or 10 of the NarraScope experience this year. Or if you've worked on the conference team, day 185 of the journey. So welcome back. We have an amazing day, and we're just so thrilled that you all are here. It's been so amazing speaking with, hearing your questions over the last several days, and today we'll enrich in that experience even further. So we have a special keynote today that has a sort of unique origin. We have in the past had a vision keynote to kick off the conference. Always someone who is not already in this community, but is representing a direction to inspire this community. And when we added the local host team this year, when we met with and had the opportunity to collaborate with the Drexel team, we started talking about, well, we could also do something on Sunday morning. And why don't we make this a local hero? Why don't we make this part of our commitment to exploring and celebrating what it can mean to really pay more attention to and do more to amplify the geography where the conference is taking place. And so we started teasing out things, but it was the local host team who put together the lists and helped us redefine what this might be, and did an amazing job of finding the candidate, Dain Saint, that is now going to be your keynote speaker. So I just want to take a quick moment to thank Drexel University in general, but also the program. Let's see. I want to list them out correctly. There are 3 components of this. So thank you to Drexel University Digital Media, Drexel University Westfall College of Media, Arts and Design, which are both sponsors that have made it possible for us to do this here, as well as contributing the local host people to help us do this, and specifically the department, Drexel University Game Design and Production. So let's thank them for making it possible for us to do this and putting the team together to collaborate with. And I want to specifically thank the Drexel local host team, Daria, Mazio, Alexis, Rob, Diana, Tony, and a brigade of student AV experts who many of you are getting to know as speakers. They've been amazing. And the wayfinding rescuers, who do more than just sort of stand there and make sure you don't fall off a curb into the street. I see them helping people find interesting things to do and ways to network and collaborate. It's been amazing working with these students. So let's thank all of them. And I want to just quickly thank our sponsors again. We are luckily able to keep this far more affordable than I think any experience like this. If you count up the dollar count per potential talk, I mean, this is a bargain, right? So everybody should come to this. This is only because all of you are contributing registration fees, and the sponsors are helping to make it possible for us to offset costs, so we can even offer low-cost ways to come here that otherwise would be very difficult and still, not run into the ground with the NarraScope program. So first, I want to highlight the community partner sponsors. This is a specific group where the partnering with us, the ways in which they've helped us understand how to really do a conference here and really understand the Philly game scene. Is a lot of that relationship. So IGDA Philly, Philly Game Mechanics, and then two groups that are very interested in helping boost and further things here. The ALA Games and today there's a librarian talk, and they made that happen even though all of the librarians worth their salt are going to come back to Philly next week for the huge ALA, tens of thousand people conference. So there, a bunch of them banded together to come in remote, so they can come early to make sure that their message is here. So thank you to them, and United Video Game Workers CWA. Thank you very much for all that you're doing. Yeah. And I'll just, among our conference sponsors, two others are also very much sort of grouped in with this local celebration. Camaraderie, who threw the great welcome party on the Friday night, and Wajid Eye Games, who used to list that they're in Brooklyn, and now they're in Philly, and really seem to be stitching themselves wonderfully into this community. So thank you to those two. And then our other sponsors are All Father Productions, Choice Beat, Choice of Games, Davidson College Film Media and Digital Studies, In-Game Sequences, Free Stars, Children of Infinity, The Game Editors, Hosted Games, One Story, Ratworm Games, and Yarn Spinner. And yeah. Okay, great. Do we need to make an adjustment? Okay, excellent. I would love to bring Daria up, who's our programming chair this year and part of the local host team, just to wave at you. I think any of you who are this year have emailed extensively with her. So, so you can put a face to a name if you haven't already seen her.
Hi everyone, my name is Daria, and well, I was not supposed to give any talks or welcome or something, so I have not prepared anything. But let me just check something. Logan, can you see me? Can you hear me? Please say something. Oh, okay, they cannot see me, but they can hear me. How about now? Okay. The camera is off.
The camera's off? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. And then it was just the camera turns on.
Oh, okay, that's helpful.
That was the issue. Hi again, my name is Daria. I'm the programming chair of this year's NarraScope, and I'm technically a PhD student / teacher at Drexel. I want to welcome you all here this year on behalf of Drexel. We are really happy to host you and the event here. Sorry, checking just to see if there's any AV messages here. So, oh, okay. I want to share something deep with you. My country is under attack. And I just want all of you to pray for it and like wish that we can live in peace, all of us together. Thank you very much for being here. I'm not gonna take any time longer, but I've met some of you in person yesterday, and today I'm gonna meet all of you in person again in Urban Center, so look forward for that. And I'm gonna pass it to Adrian Sandoval, the chair of IGDA Philadelphia, and our professor at the game department at Drexel.
Thank you, Daria, and thank you to JD and Matt and everybody at NarraScope that made this possible. Thank you to Drexel and all of the wonderful student volunteers, a lot of those whose faces I recognize from my classes and such. Like, all of this wouldn't have been possible without you. I really, really appreciate that. 2 seconds, let me get this right. I had my intro all printed nicely and everything, and then I didn't grab it. So if I'm just staring down at here, that's why. Thank you all so much. So yeah, good morning, NarraScope. So as was mentioned, I'm Adrian Sandoval. I'm the chair for the Philadelphia chapter of the International Game Developers Association. Among the other things our chapter does, the one that we've prided ourselves on for a long time, longer than I've even been chair, is consistent monthly meetings with a focus on shared community knowledge, with guest speakers, usually those that highlight the Philly local game development talent, in order to help each of us build our skill sets, hone our crafts, tell better stories. It's why I was so excited at the prospect that Philly could be host to NarraScope when it was mentioned to me by Justin Bortnick nearly a year ago today. Now more than ever, I believe that we need places where creatives, artists, writers, and others can come together, share what's worked for us as well as what hasn't, and most importantly, work together towards building a better future. The truth is, I've been thinking a lot about the value of community lately. When I first met our keynote speaker, Dain Saint, it was at an IGDA meeting, not as the chair for the chapter, but as a newly graduated student from the game development program over at Camden County College, where my professor, Ryan Morrison, would, just as he still does today, march his students over the river to start building connection and fostering relationships with others outside of our school. I remember that Dain and his creative partner, William Stallwood, talked about Auditorium, their first release game from the studio, Cipher Prime, which was a pivotal moment in my own history. It was a dazzling light and sound show, as well as a minimalist, mind-bending puzzle game all in one. It challenged players to discover solutions through experimentation and discovery, and for myself, it was one of the first times that I was really challenged at what a game could be. For me, the audacious experiences that Dain helped build at Cipher Prime defined what made the Philly game scene and the Philly game so special and unique. They embraced artistry and they defied expectation. This burgeoning sense of community that before that I never really had was only bolstered then by the Philly Game Forge, a co-working space from Dain & Co., which, true to its name, forged so many friendships that gave way to new studios, new games, new interactive experiences, and even future communities such as the Philly Game Mechanics, an organization that, alongside ours, continues to help nurture and grow that community. Dain was so instrumental to building the foundations for the Philly game scene, and I am so forever grateful that they were dedicated not just to their craft, and a genuine belief in games and interactive experiences as a creative medium that could teach us more about the world around us as well as ourselves, but to lending their voice and inspiring others to the same with their own work. In the years since then, Dain has worked as a journalist for the Philadelphia Inquirer, building interactive stories, built art exhibitions and installations, and has graciously lent their years of experience in games and interactive narrative spaces to other designers and talents, while also focusing on their own writing, poetry, and music. In other words, they've continued to lift up our community and inspire others as they've done for over 15 years now. At IGDA Philadelphia, I'm often talking about the importance of preserving our local community's history. Teaching game history, as I do here at Drexel, I often tell students that the history of media and the arts, not just games, is the story of people. It's the shared story of all the artists who came before us, who then go on to inspire the next generation of creators who continue to contribute and evolve their medium. In that way, Dain continues to be an important part of our city's history, our story. He sowed the seeds that led so many of our community members to where we are today and continues to challenge us all to envision and build a better future in the years to come. And I'm so excited to introduce him to you today. So please, everyone, give a warm welcome to Dain Saint.
I was very cruel to subject me to that much kindness this early in the morning. Hello. Welcome to Drexel. Welcome to Philly. If you haven't gotten, I don't know, a cheesesteak, do that. If you haven't gotten a roast pork sandwich, I would also do that. We have really good food here, is what I'm saying. And you should definitely get on that if you haven't already. Sorry, I'm just still kind of processing 15 years in Philly. That's wild. I want to talk today about games, yes, but also reality and the universe and these sort of big, grand concepts that are the things that I like to think about in my spare time, which I never let myself actually have. I'm kind of always working. But there's an underlying thread here. And when it comes to interactive storytelling, when it comes to games, when it comes to this medium that we are a part of, I think sometimes we can get really focused on how do we properly execute a branching path narrative? How do we properly make sure that something is compiling properly, or that this is pixel perfect, or that when it goes to print, we've chosen the right fonts. You know, we love the craft, and so we get very focused on these sort of fine details because we have something we want to say, and we have something that we want to communicate. But I'd like to take a moment to pull out from that and kind of look at the broader shape of what it means to be an interactive storyteller, and especially what it means to be an interactive storyteller in 2025, as we are seeing so much conflict in the world, and seeing the effects of not taking ownership over our own narratives. So, a little bit about me. I am an interactive storyteller, nerd, sci-fi fan, poet, game designer. I love X-Men. That was like my big thing growing up. That really inspired me to look at how things could be different and to look at our sort of unique talents, not as something that can separate, but as something that can bring us together. Oftentimes people will say something to me along the lines of like, oh, you do so many different things. And I always find that strange because I don't think that poetry is different from music. I don't think that music is different from games. I don't think that these are different things. They're all kind of different lenses on storytelling. Basquiat pretty famously said, you know, if art is how we decorate space, music is how we decorate time. And I feel like games are how we decorate experiences. I feel like these are all kind of one and the same aspect. And I would encourage you that if somebody is trying to separate your artistry into digestible pieces, don't let them. A little bit louder. This is a microphone. I can bring it right here. Is that better? Wonderful. I am still waking up. It's Sunday. Let's talk about futurelessness. This is a term that I have found very helpful to describe the moment that we are moving through right now. It is a repeated undercurrent in a lot of the conversations that I have, especially with students, especially in people in the generation sort of coming up behind me, is you'll hear it in that sort of sigh that people will give when you ask them, well, what are your career plans? You'll hear it in the heavy glance down that people give when you ask them, like, oh, what are you looking forward to? Or is there anywhere that you would like to travel to? Any of these sort of forward-looking questions. I've noticed that future has become more of an F word than the original curse that we have. And so this term futurelessness is something that I've found to be a very useful handle. This feeling like we've reached the end of our story. Now, I have two conditions isn't the right word. My brain is shaped in two specific ways. I have ADHD and I have depression. And this is the thing that these are both things I've dealt with my entire life. ADHD means my brain doesn't make dopamine, and depression means my brain doesn't make serotonin, which is fun because it means that it is both very difficult for me to get started on a task, and when I complete the tasks, I don't feel a sense of accomplishment over them, which I'm sure some of you can relate to. One of the things that I've learned through depression is that feeling of a loss of agency and a loss of satisfaction with our place in the world can create a similar thing. So in my mind, futurelessness is exactly the same thing as depression. Whereas depression is something that we experience individually, futurelessness is what happens when an entire society or a community engages with this feeling of depression. And it is really coming from a lack of agency, a lack of an ability to feel like they are at the helm of their own story. Futurelessness is learned helplessness. And this is a term from psychology for a lot of these behaviors that we'll see in both humans and animals. When we are repeatedly subjected to an adverse stimulus, something that causes pain and that we cannot escape, eventually, as a survival mechanism, we kind of shut down our energy and behave as though we are helpless to change our own situation. This is, one of the ways that, they train elephants, for instance, in countries where an elephant ride or something like that becomes, if you tie them up when they are young and they learn that they can't pull away from the rope, even when they become larger and they have, tons of mass behind them, a rope on them is still enough for them to believe, oh, I can't do anything. It becomes a learned response to a world that seems overwhelming. And that's the futurelessness that we're moving through. So how do we get out of that? Agency. We have to know that we can change things, that it is even possible to change things. It's one of the reasons why, my therapist would recommend, like, if I'm in that state of feeling helpless, feeling like I can't affect things, they'll say something like, do one dish, do one push-up, do one small thing that reminds you that change is even possible, and then grow that practice of doing that one small thing into a practice of changing everything else. The second thing I need to define is reality, which shouldn't take long. What reality isn't is the universe. The universe and reality are different things. The universe is a mystery, and when I say that, I think that people will kind of look at that and say, oh, a mystery means knowledge that is hidden, right? The universe is hiding things from us, so we have to uncover the secrets of the mystery of the universe, right? It's not exactly it. There's the lowercase m mystery, which is something that is hidden, secret, or unexplainable, right? But from the Gnostic texts, we have this idea of the capital M mystery, which is something that becomes more unknown the more that you learn of it. We learned that there are atoms, we learned that there are electrons, we learn all of these things, and we learn that the color red, for instance, doesn't really exist. Red is a story that our minds create when wavelengths of light of a certain frequency hit our retina, and our brain has to come up with a way to explain that. The universe doesn't have red. Reality has red. The universe is a mystery not because it is unknowable, but because it is infinitely knowable. The more we learn about it, the more we know that we don't know. And so that is a difficult place for humans to live. So we have to create this thing that we call reality. It's our experience of the universe. Realities are constructed from two things: the things that we observe and the stories that we tell about them. I'm just going to repeat that one more time. Reality is constructed from the things that we observe and the stories that we tell about them. And as a result, the reality that we live in is formed by consensus. It's the story that we tell each other about what it means to be human in society. When our stories line up, we call that reality. If you try to tell a different story, people will tell you that you are being unrealistic. So, how do we practice that? How do we change reality? How do we change the story that we're in? Interactive storytelling. This is how we do it. Interactive storytelling has a lot of different definitions. The one that I like is that interactive storytelling is any story experience where the person receiving the story has the agency to alter it, where there is no distinction between author and recipient. And in that definition, interactive storytelling is a much broader and older practice that we give it credit for. We'll frequently think about interactive storytelling as something that only became possible with the advent of computing. Maybe we'll go even a little further back and say D&D is also a form of interactive storytelling. But tens of thousands of years ago, when we were gathered around campfires telling the stories of our ancestors, those too were interactive stories. People would jump in with their own experiences, with their own expression, dance, music. Interactive storytelling is both extremely new and extremely old, and reality itself is that form of interactive storytelling. Interaction is how we affect one another. How do we play with, interrogate, move beyond that division between author and player? It's not about clicks, rules, and pages. It's about how we engage in storycraft with each other. So I'm going to go through a bit of my career, piece by piece, to pick up some lessons about interactive storytelling that I've picked up over 15 years, Adrian, really? Good Lord. I started off my career, so I went to school for engineering first, because I'm an immigrant family, and then found games accidentally, fell in love with it, did that for about 10 years. I then went to work for the Inquirer as an interactive journalist for about the last 5 years. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a theatrical TTRPG called Space Opera, which I've been lucky enough to work on with Obvious Agency, which we'll get into. And after leaving the paper for reasons, I have since been looking at creating community around collaborative storytelling. And this thread of interactive storytelling and reality weaving wasn't apparent to me until I really sort of had to sit with it in the last year or so. But let's start with Cipher Prime. Oh, actually, let's start with what my notes say. There are 3 drives within my artistic practice. From my engineering background, I have a love of systems that help explain our world, especially when we get into game theory. From my artistry, I have a desire to help people feel seen and especially feel what their superpower is. I love the idea in X-Men of finding people who think that they have a deficiency and showing them how that is a superpower. In the same way that the hyper-focus of my ADHD allowed me to get these slides done in the last 24 hours. And I have a deep belief in the mystery, capital M mystery, that connects all of us, because after all, if we are here and we are playing a game, we should play as much of it as we can. And these 3 drives create these sort of practices that I have around changing reality. First is to reward the behavior that you want to see in the world. The second is to value honesty more than you demand truth. And the third is to practice making space to tell these stories together. We're going to go through each of these piece by piece. So we'll expound on this. Let's start with Cipher Prime. Cipher Prime was founded by myself and William Stallwood in about 2007, 2008, around then. If you're keeping track, that means that we started making games before the iPhone existed. Our first game was a Flash game. I see no nods of recognition on what Flash is. Okay, thank God. Jeez. Yeah, so we started making games kind of accidentally, and part of that accidental nature was not knowing what rules were to make games, and we focused really on making experiences that allowed people to express their creativity in a safe space. So like Auditorium, the game Adrian mentioned, there was no way to lose. There was no wrong way to play. There were no time limits. You couldn't quit out. It was just, you can sit here and play. One of my fun things with auditoriums, we found through analytics that some people were having play times in like 10, 12, 13-hour increments. And when we reached out to those players, it was because they would set up a loop and let the music play and then just leave it there, playing as a piece of art in the background or something to go to sleep to, which I found really sweet. These are all our games. We did this in about 10 years. We released a game a year. It turns out that is not a sustainable business practice, both economically and energetically, but I'm still very proud of everything that we did make. Our most sort of traditional interactive storytelling game is this game, Line Weight, which has some, there we go. This game was originally going to be a strategy game. The pitch was what if Inside Out but StarCraft? And through the course of wanting to tell a more emotional experience, we decided that we just wanted to tell stories. So we created this more visual essay form with minimal gameplay as people kind of weave in and out of puzzles, emotionals, content, visuals. And it was just a little game about connection that we put out. This is actually the last game that we put out under the Cipher Prime banner. And I would invite you to check it out because I think it's really cool. I don't have a lot of lessons from this game because the code base is shite. But it was very gratifying to work on. The game I actually do want to talk about, though, is a game called Tailwind. This is a game, this was originally meant to be our second game. This was meant to be a shmup. Big alien invasion vibes. We couldn't make it work as our second game because we just weren't skilled enough, and maybe the game itself hadn't baked long enough either. So I think 6 or 7 games later, we came back to it and created this experience. I'm going to let the content play in a second, but just so you have an understanding of what's going on. Tailwind is a game where you play the last survivor of an alien invasion. You attempt to escape the planet in an experimental ship. You escape the atmosphere, but you don't have enough fuel to actually escape. And so you resolve yourself to fighting for what's left. So I'm going to let this play, and then I'm going to get into why this game taught me so much about the way games interact with reality. that's Tailwind. We really focused on game feel. That was like one of the big things. It has to just feel good to do the thing. And so we created a game where we have your little ship. You could flit around the screen. You have so much agility to make up for the fact that the ship itself doesn't have any weapons. It has shields. It has the fire that comes out of the back that you could maybe use as a weapon. The shields explode on impact as well. You can gather this pink energy to like hurtle like a lightning bolt. The feel of it is really nice. But we reached this point where, and let me just see, yeah. We reached this point where we were in beta testing and the feel was good, but we didn't know what the point of the game was. What people are trying to do, right? So we set up 3 different beta tests and we tried 3 different win conditions. We said, okay, when you play, go for the highest score. The way the scoring system worked in Tailwind, you would do a combo system was how you got more. If you got your multiples, so you're trying to hit like 5, 6 enemies at once, you're trying to maximize use of the lightning ability, and that would be how you would get your higher score. So when people played that way, they were jumping around, they were being very strategic about how they took out enemies, and that's how we get the high score. The next one we said, hey, survive the longest, get the longest amount of time on the clock because it's an infinite game in that way. And those people played a lot more cautiously. They would avoid enemies. They focused on breaking apart the asteroids to get shields so that they could survive the longest, right? And then in the third one, we said, why don't you kill the most enemies, right? Just pure chaos. That was less combo driven, less agile, less cautious, just full destruction. And we ended up seeing 3 completely different play styles in Tailwind, despite the fact that the underlying mechanics of the game did not change at all. And so from that, I have my first principle, which is that if you change what it means to win, you change how people play the game. This is deeply important to understand about games and deeply important to understand about systems. It doesn't just apply in the things that we make, but all systems. If we look at our voting system, because we have first past the post voting, we have a 2-party system because that's optimal play. You see all of your political parties coalesce into 2 sides. And one of the ways that you can confront that is by changing the underlying system of voting to something more like ranked choice, for instance. So a lot of the things that we deal with in systems of human interaction are defined not by human behavior, but by the systems that enable people's agency. After about 10 years of making games, doing the Game Forge, hosting these sort of weekly dev nights that grew into the Philly game mechanics, I was a bit burnt out on games, and I had seen the ways that this sort of work can help people in the community. And an opportunity came up for me to go and work for the Philadelphia Inquirer as an interactive journalist, which wasn't even a thing that I had realized existed, but it seemed like a good way to use the skills that I had developed in order to more directly aid the community. So I took that job in 2020. I started in January of 2020, my first time in a newsroom, which, if you remember what happened in 2020, very interesting time to start working in a newsroom. I remember distinctly thinking that year that the impeachment trial for Trump in January of that year would be the story of the year, and I was very, very wrong. The news is an interesting beast because there's a lot of different hands on the narrative as it passes through. There's your primary sources, that's a journalist who gathers those sources. That narrative is shaped by the questions that the journalists ask. That is then turned into a piece of journalism that it then passes through the editors who make sure that everything feels truthful and is as accurate as can be. That then passes through marketing, and then at the very end, the choices of what stories actually end up on the front page can be driven by everything from what is considered newsworthy to what people will click on. And so a lot of those same systems of what it means to win, what it means to have a successful front page, can have a tremendous impact on what we see as news and story, the shared story that we have about what is happening in the world. One of the things I remember in 2020, obviously, was the George Floyd protests, and I had a lot of well-meaning white friends sort of come to me and ask, like, well, if this happened in Minneapolis, why are they protesting in Philadelphia? And that was a wild question to me. But it made me realize, oh, for a lot of people, you really don't have the context. You don't really understand why this moment is happening. And so for that, I created this timeline called Black and Blue. This is a timeline that details every instance of police brutality against the Black community of Philadelphia that we were able to find, starting with the founding of the Philadelphia Police Department nearly 200 years ago. This is not a piece that most people would consider necessarily interactive, but I want to share it anyways because as we talk about, again, interactive storytelling being the interplay between author and player, I would like to do this. One of the interesting things here is that as we go through, there's just so much history here as we go from the 1800s all the way through to the present day. This length and time is a pivotal piece of how this story is communicated. Because the thing that I want to communicate as context isn't necessarily every individual instance of brutality, but the weight of history. And we just keep going. So this was 2020. I think that this format started becoming a bit more popular in 2022. There was another piece that came out. I think his name was Michael Korstroff, did a piece called One Pixel Wealth that some of you may have seen, where it details just how much money Jeff Bezos has. And again, part of that is just the interminable scroll. This very simple interaction where you have to go through and you're just seeing every last thing that we could find. And people wrote in to show us the things that we missed because not everything gets documented in the archives. Yeah, this is what it looked like in Philly in 2020. And that's the piece. These sorts of things go a long way to communicating context and history using time to communicate scale. The other story that I wanted to talk about for my, actually here, yeah. One of the things that I really grated on me when I was entering, because I didn't go to journalism school, so I didn't have this idea of like objectivity really like put on me as like, oh, we must be objective. And so I kept getting into a lot of trouble because I would do these pieces that felt very honest, and I was told that they were too emotional, or that they weren't objective enough, or that I was perhaps too close to the subject, or maybe that they were opinion. And it's strange the things that a storied institution might consider opinion, like giving homeless people homes is cheaper than leaving them on the street. That was considered an opinion piece, which I found strange, despite the fact that we have decades of research showing that. Yeah. But journalists really want this idea of objectivity because they think that objectivity brings you closer to truth, and truth is paramount. But what this does is it creates an ecosystem where journalism feels separate from the communities that they tell stories about. We're constantly grinding against calls for objectivity that can sometimes just look like being complacent with the status quo. And we confuse objectivity, sort of removing the emotional element, with telling the truth, right? There's a difference between saying a man was killed in a police-involved shooting and saying the police shot a man. Very different sentences, even though they're communicating the same event. So, to sort of look at what this can be as far as an honest experience that isn't necessarily truthful, I don't know. Show of hands, how many people are from Philly? Oh, this is going to be fun for y'all then. Last year, a horse got loose on I-95. And this is just such an this image, this video is so Philly to me, especially with the 6 ABC up in the corner. Shout out Action News. Horse loose on the highway. This horse belonged to the Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club. It is a Black-owned establishment up in North Philadelphia that teaches and makes available riding, horse riding for inner city youth. They come and learn how to take care of the horses, how to brush them, how to shod them, and it really creates a place for a connection to nature in the middle of a really densely developed area. And when I saw this on my way to my morning meeting, I looked at that and I said, well, that's a game. And so we created Horse 95. We made an infinite runner where you have to dodge these construction pylons and collect Wawa coffee to keep up your horsepower. As you get through, we actually show you how far you've traveled, and we give you a special shout out when you get as far up I-95 as the horse did. And this was, I mean, after very many years of covering like very heavy subjects, I came in with a strong desire to inject some joy and levity into the news, into something that is very constantly telling us that the sky is falling. It took a little bit of convincing to get this out, but we turned this around in a day and a half, which I'm really proud of our team for knocking it out and getting it done. I'm sad that I wasn't able to get the music that I wanted licensed for this. It was a Iron Maiden track that seemed really appropriate. But you know, a day and a half and local paper budgets notwithstanding, this ended up taking off. And this was actually the first time that I'd seen the Inquirer show up on Engadget, which was a lot of fun. The great thing about this, though, was Fletcher Street Urban Riding Club saw it, and they loved the piece. They reached out to me on Instagram and offered to let me come by the stables and check things out. And I actually got to ride that horse. I had ridden a little when I was a kid, and I got thrown from a horse pretty badly, and I never got back on. I always had kind of like a trepidation about it. So this experience actually allowed me to like confront my own fear of getting back on. And this is a massive horse. This is like an Amish country, like plow pulling horse. But I got to meet the entire crew over there, learn their story. I wrote an essay about this that was sort of a follow-up piece to the game. And what that showed me was that the game was more honest than a simple story saying horse loose on 95 would have been. It connected more authentically. It communicated that we are in community with the people that we're telling stories about. We see you. We are affected by you. This thing that happened, which it turned out, you know, they had gotten the horse. Somebody had left one of the stables just like not properly locked. They had just gotten it. The horse was a little confused and was literally trying to run back to where it remembered being. So getting to share in that sense of like panic and community with them, but then having them reach out and then going to talk to them and find that story. And so much of this allowed for an honest connection that wasn't separate, and by definition was not objective. You know, I saw this, I thought it was funny, let's make a game out of it, let's make light of this. They reached out, I got a chance to ride the horse, I got a chance to tell my story as a part of this. And, you know, we were able to send more people to Fletcher Street Riding Club. We actually made I don't have the picture here, but we actually designed a NES cartridge style graphic for Horse 95 that we let them sort of put on shirts. And it was just a beautiful moment of actually being in conversation with the community rather than simply reporting on it. And what that showed me is that there is a difference between telling the truth and being honest. That's my second guideline for how we use this medium to to shift reality around us, being in conversation with people. 3 years ago, after I had done a performance of music and poetry down at Cherry Street Pier that was produced by a local cabaret company called the Bearded Ladies Cabaret. This was, I believe, 2021, 2022. So this was one of the first big shows that I was able to do. We'd say post-pandemic, if a lot of you weren't still wearing masks. But after the initial swell got back to the point where we were no longer social distancing, no longer sort of like staying at home, and we were able to do a big show there. And some of the people that put that together, some of the most lovely people I've met, reached out to me a little later saying, hey, so we're working on a theatrical TTRPG, and we know that you do games, and would you like to be a part of this? And yes, I did want to be a part of it. We've been working on it for the last 3 years, and it looks like this. This was our premiere last Saturday. It's a 3-episode experience where we gather up to 40 players in a room, set them up at various societies, and we get them to engage in decision-making together, which I know sounds very exciting. But we do this in a far sci-fi universe where every society is to a planet. Myself and Daniel Park, who's one of the worker owners at Obvious Agency, function as co-GMs. And we bring this world to life with sound, light, music, and performance to create an experience where it is safe for people to engage in conflict resolution, democratic decision-making, to understand what it means to have a voice and to have agency. This piece is really near and dear to my heart, so much to the point where after the last election, when I was sitting at the Inquirer having sort of an existential crisis about whether I wanted to cover another Trump presidency, this project showed me that I didn't have to do that. And so I left the Inquirer in January to pursue interactive storytelling full-time. One of the problems that we had in space opera was what we call the Dinkus problem. We wanted people to engage in conflict, but players kept defaulting to soft consensus. We want people to be able to say like, no, that's not what we're gonna do. I want to do that. Have strong opinions, but people keep like, hey, let's work together on this, right? Strange thing. We tried a lot of different things. We tried different voting structures. We tried to incentivize dissent. We tried giving people hidden agendas and different information. We've tried literally telling players to disagree more. 3 years and like $250,000 later, we did not solve this problem. people keep trying to come together and do soft consensus. They'll engage in some fight across societies, but at the table, they're still like, well, how do we come together for the good of the society that we're sort of role-playing as, right? I have since stopped thinking about this as a problem. It is actually really hard to get people to choose conflict with each other. I want that, if you take nothing else away from this talk, I want you to know that, especially as we're looking at the headlines today, especially as we're looking at the tensions flaring across the world, the rise of authoritarianism, the rise of fascism in places, the things that we are told oftentimes through our news media about each other. It is actually really hard to get people to choose conflict with each other. We, as professional game designers, spent 3 years and $250,000 trying to get players to do it, and they don't. So I want you to take that into consideration and understand how much time and money has been spent to get us to disagree with each other. People want to tell stories together. They just don't know how. So that's my third guideline for these experiences. We will be doing a panel on space opera later today. If you want to learn a bit more about that experience, I would recommend coming out. So this matters to me now because I feel like a lot of art forms make work that reflects reality. I kind of have an internal metric that art is about expression and design is about communication, and the interplay of those two things is really important. You can't have one without the other. But I do truly believe that interactive storytelling can reshape reality because it is the practice of coming together, telling stories together, looking at the systems that underpin our decisions and giving each other a glimpse of what agency can look like when practiced in community. So with all of these guidelines, I said I left the paper at the beginning of this year. I have started to build a community called Futurefull. It's centered on marginalized identities, people of color, people between multiple identities, queer people especially. Because I think that those that are furthest from power need to imagine those new realities the most. And the work that I'm doing with space opera and in sort of communicating like this is all deeply driven by this desire to put these principles into practice. I truly believe that we can't fight for a future that we can't imagine, and that the work that we do gives people the tools to imagine those futures, and not just imagine them, but put them into practice. We change reality by creating systems that support the stories that we want to live in. If you change how people play, if you change what it means to win, you change how people play the game. So we change those systems, and we start to see how action, human action, lines up with the values that we care about. We change reality by creating space for us to be honest with each other and to being able to hold contradicting truths and not say that your truth has to be the same as mine if we have an honest experience that we both appreciate. And we change reality by creating time and space to tell these stories together. That's how we change reality.
Can we use this for questions? So we have 15 minutes for questions, and we have a couple questions already from the Discord. So I'm going to jump in one of those, and but take this this time to get your questions ready. Okay, so first one. Was the breakneck 1.5-day turnaround on Horse 95 due to an attempt to get the game out while it was still relevant and in the news?
Yes. I in a more upsetting conversation with one of my editors, news is called news for a reason. It has to be new. We couldn't put that out to even a week later because it would no longer be fresh in people's minds. So luckily, having done Dev Night at the Game Forge and had our monthly game jams, I'd gotten very practiced at knocking out a game very quickly, and the rest of the team really stepped in to make sure that we had our graphics and everything set. So yeah, it was partially because it needed to stay news relevant, and also, I don't know, I think at the time I wanted to feel that. One of the things I said about ADHD is that my brain doesn't produce dopamine as much as I like, but it turns out you can replace dopamine with adrenaline.
This is a true thing. I know this quite well. Do we have a question from the room here? Or I'll keep going with these wonderful questions being formed by people who type. Okay, go ahead. Bring this to you so we can include it.
So what brought you from like games to theater in particular? And I didn't know that interactive theater was a thing before NarraScope. Can you tell us a little bit about what space opera does?
Absolutely. So theater people were looking to make a game, and they reached out to me as a game designer, and it seemed like an interesting project to hop onto. I hadn't done sort of interactive theater before space opera. I hadn't even actually GM'd, which was wild to me now that I spend so much of my time GMing. I had never played like D&D or anything like that growing up. Even with the Forge, it just kind of like kept missing me. And now I'm deeply in love with the art form. I think it's profoundly incredible. Space opera's sort of theatrical nature is us being in conversation with the players. And so aside from just having sort of lights, sound, set dressing to make the space feel a certain way, we also have performer facilitators that are at each table, and they go back and forth between just facilitating gameplay and then sort of stepping out into a more performative space to enact scenes that are happening on the planets that the players are role-playing as. So we move between sort of raw gameplay at the tables, narration from the game masters, and improvised scenes that the performer facilitators put on. Most often when we do interactive theater, it's going to be something that's a bit more on the LARP side of things, where you walk through and there is a very complicated like branching narrative that you move through. This is interactive more in the way that we are generating theater in response to the decisions that players are making. And like I said, we have a panel later on today if you're interested that we can get more into the nitty-gritty of space opera itself.
And I just assigned you to be the host of that panel, so you'll get to you're forced to learn more about it. Okay, some more great questions from the audience online. Florencia Menuzzi asks, I find it interesting and heartening to see that people avoid conflict in space opera. It's different from many TTRPG groups I've seen. What kind of balance of character group and community incentives do you think space opera may be striking to help people come together?
I think there may be, I will admit to there possibly being a self-selection bias for the sort of people that will go into a dark room for 7 hours to tell stories with other people. But also, there is a really interesting phenomenon with humans where we assign ourselves to an in-group and an out-group very, very quickly. And so what ends up happening is because we have 5 tables of different societies, and we give them all different archetypes, different drives, at the table, it is so much easier for people to look in the eyes of the people that they're with at the table and say, it's us versus them. So we're more likely to get conflict between societies than we are to get conflict within societies. So yeah. One of the ways that you can direct people's cooperation and conflict is by telling them who their in-group and their out-group is. And yeah, tell me if you've seen that play out in the rest of our society.
Well, thanks. First of all, that was an amazing presentation. Thanks so much. It was exactly what I needed to hear today. I'm curious about how your experience as a poet affects the design of your games.
Poetry is about doing the most with the least, in my experience. And when we were doing our games, like Cipher Prime, for instance, you might notice, with the exception of Monster Want Burger, which was a really fun, just like jam, most of our game titles are a single word. There's a very specific experience that we're trying to communicate in that. We had a game that we did called Splice, where it's a puzzle game where you're sort of rearranging these chains of microbes, and the desire for that, the very, very specific desire was, I want players to feel like they are in a lab as a scientist working late at night trying to uncover the mysteries of life. Like that's the very specific emotional thing, and everything around the game, from the way that it's presented, the audio experience of it, the way the music is composed, because the puzzles were very challenging, so the music was composed in this very soothing, like Philip Glass style. All of that is around like, let's lock you in to just like sitting here and pondering and having this experience. So that connection between poetry and games for me is, if I say something, the poetry side of things would say something like, birds don't defy gravity, they just know how to play with the weight of the world without carrying it. There's a desire to communicate the fullness of an experience with as little as possible. And if you do that and you can get to that to somebody's heart, then their experience will fill in the gap.
I have another online question. This is from Max. You mentioned originally being an engineering graduate that switched into games. What finally pushed you or gave you the courage to take up games as a career instead of a hobby? Did you deal with any pushback from defying familial expectations or dealing with career uncertainty, instability? Asking as a new graduated engineering student experiencing something similar now. Thanks.
Yeah, I was a bad engineer. I was bad at it. I'm real good at making stuff up, and I'm real bad at lab work. I did not have, ADHD. I couldn't sit there and it's like, let's titrate this solution again. Not good. While I was in school, I was also learning Flash, and I was learning web development. And so when I was unable to find work as an engineer, I guess sort of continued to freelance and work in that direction. That's how we kind of fell into games accidentally. Familial pushback. My parents, my dad growing up always said to me, I don't care if you flip burgers so long as you're the best burger flipper in the world, right? It was very much like, whatever you do, put as much of yourself into it as you can. And I think that, when I told them that when I told my parents that games is the thing that I was going into, there was a little like, okay, are you gonna live? Are you gonna be okay with that? The instability, you just like anything else, you fight instability with community. You don't have to hold yourself up. We're not meant to hold ourselves up. We're meant to hold each other up. So being in community with other people that are going through what you're going through will help you emotionally. Being in connection with other people that are in the same field as you will help you financially. It will give you opportunities. And as I've hopefully shown, being flexible being firm on what you want to do and flexible about how you get there, I think is the way to move through the instability of the job market and the questions about what the future looks like, with agility and grace. And also, if you are following something that is your heart's desire, give yourself some props for doing a very hard thing. All of the messages that we get, they don't do that. So by taking that first step, you're already kind of changing your own reality.
And just as a quick heads up, because your laptop has gone to sleep, you may need to reset the screen if you want that card up. Now, here's a question from the audience.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, Dain. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was really wonderful. I'm curious, you've worked across a bunch of mediums, interactive theater, games, journalism. Were there any lessons that you learned in any mediums that you worked in outside of games that you would now take into making any games that you make in the future?
Yes. I would. There are two kind of internal metrics that I've settled on for when a thing might be done. Before therapy, I would say when I hate a project, that's when I know it's about ready to be released. And after therapy, after kind of sitting with and being in community with a lot of people, somebody said to me once, "Of course you hate your art when you're done with it. You're a better artist now than when you started it." And I think that sentiment is the thing that I would bring in, less so, lessons from. Because that came from a painter that I knew, and I can't paint, I can't draw. I'm not that kind of artist. So not my specific experience in art, but like talking with somebody who has had a similar thing and gone through that thing of like perfectionism and everything has to be like exactly so. It doesn't have to be exactly so. There was an interesting conversation I had with someone that encouraged me to dig into like language a bit, and we were talking about like, oh, it's deadlines. We keep going into deadlines. How do we know when something is done? Well, the deadline. You got to get it done for the deadline. And we had a whole conversation about, well, what would it mean to move from deadlines to lifelines? What would it mean if the thing that said the thing was done wasn't an external threat, but an internal sort of completion? And there was something in cooking that felt very appropriate for that. When a meal is done, when you finish cooking it, it's done. You serve it. That's the time. You don't wait, another 3 months to serve a meal that you finish cooking. You serve it when it's ready. And as you serve it and you enjoy it, maybe you make some notes about the next meal that you'll make. But this meal is ready. And so that was something from cooking and conversation that I found really helpful to move from this concept of deadlines to lifelines.
So we're going to only have time for one more in-room question. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll come stand next to you. But we have like 15 like really great questions here. So you all really should raise the bar. Great, okay. Okay, so this is a two-part question with one of them being very, very quick from Matthew R.F. Balasek. And so the question probably asking for a more lengthy response is, you mentioned actual play on your website in terms of Futurefull. Are these documented outside of folks who are live participants? So that's the one, the big, but also in an ideal world with more budget and time, what was the Iron Maiden song you wanted to license so that we can play it our own when we play your game?
Genghis Khan. Strong galloping horse beat in that one that felt appropriate. Yeah, so like I said, when I started working on space opera, that was my first time game mastering. It turns out I have a knack for it, people keep telling me, and I've kind of fallen in love with the form. I give Dropout all of my money. And I've started sort of moving into actual play as a GM as well. I've done a couple of streams with the Roll D5 crew and a few other things like that. So that's kind of more on my like personal artistry side. One of the things that I'm trying to do with Futurefull, I'm hoping this year, is to find a way to combine a teach-in where people learn practical tips about how to move through a moment like we're in. Things like how do you secure your online footprint, your digital footprint, and what do you do if ICE is in your neighborhood? And taking those very real things and combining it with live actual play with those people. So having like an activist that comes, teaches a bit, and then engages in some play, so that we inject a bit of joy into the movement. I don't think that movement work is meant to be all sacrifice all the time, and that feels very much like the mentality to move away from. And bringing joy and storytelling into that is something that I'm really focused on for Futurefull.
Tailwind, is that right? You had talked about changing the win conditions changes the way that people are going to engage with the game. And you said that you had the feel of the game down. How did each of those three approaches that you had to those win conditions, how did that change the emotional experience or the thesis that you wanted to say with the game?
Well, the thesis of the game was before you die, live. That was the tagline for the game. And the movement of it, it was aerial ballet. That was the sort of driving force that Will had for how the thing was meant to feel. If you're in free fall, has anybody gone skydiving? Great. Put your hands up if you've been skydiving. Keep it up if you had health insurance when you did. Yeah, that you and me. Yeah. It's different when you don't have health insurance. There's a moment when you first leap out of the plane and you're looking through and you realize that the sky is blue because air is blue. That allows you to, because you're looking through seeing the ground like you're looking through a swimming pool. And for somebody whose brain is constantly chattering away, having that moment of like, oh, no thoughts. I'm plummeting to earth. Why am I here? There's a part of that, like freedom from attachment, of freedom of movement, freedom of agility, all these kinds of things that we wanted to kind of get into the experience. And those win conditions, saying you are going to be going for the high score, which means you go for combos, which means you're being precise, which means you're being strategic. You're hitting these combos. That changed the, we said aerial ballet, but it changed kind of like the dance, right? You're still moving, you're still dancing, but now you are, the movement became a bit more of a tango, right? Really sharp, angular movements with a lot of expression, versus doing something where you're going for staying alive as long as you can. It's a lot more flowy and avoiding a bit more of like a blues dance kind of thing. So I think that the thesis of feeling alive, right, despite all of this chaos happening, that was a constant through line. Having that agency and really feeling like there's chaos around you, but you have control over how you move through that chaos, that stayed. But what changed was the quality of movement, the kind of dance that you did in staying alive through chaos.
And so there are, as I mentioned, many more really excellent questions online. Those of you who didn't get to ask a question you wanted to, put it in the into the discussion in Discord, and maybe we can tease Dain into showing up and keeping that conversation going. So let's thank Dain again.